In the fading light of a Mediterranean dusk, the once mighty harbor of Venice lay eerily silent, its grand galleys reduced to ghostly silhouettes against the lapping waters. No longer did the cries of merchants and the clatter of loading cranes echo through the canals. Instead, a profound stillness hung in the air, broken only by the distant toll of a lonely bell. This was not the abrupt end of a city, but the slow, inexorable death of its lifeblood, commerce. Across centuries and continents, port cities have stood as vibrant arteries of human ambition, channeling goods, ideas, and fortunes from distant shores. Yet when trade withered, these hubs of prosperity transformed into haunting relics of faded glory. Viewers, imagine the salt-tinged breeze carrying whispers of empires lost, as we delve into the hidden fractures that turned bustling docks into abandoned wharves, where the collapse did not announce itself with fanfare, but crept in like the tide, silent and unstoppable. The story of port cities when commerce died begins in the golden age of maritime empires, where strategic harbors dictated the pulse of global exchange. Venice, the queen of the Adriatic, rose as a supreme entrepot in the late Middle Ages, its lagoon defenses shielding a network of trade routes that stretched from the spice markets of the East to the wool fairs of Northern Europe. Ships laden with silks, pepper, and precious metals crowded the Piscina di San Marco, their sails billowing like triumphant banners. Similar fates shaped other ports, the Hanseatic strongholds like Lübeck and Bruges, where northern merchants forged alliances that funneled timber, furs, and grain across the Baltic and North Seas. Daily life in these cities pulsed with rhythmic certainty, the creak of rigging at dawn, the haggling in crowded piazzas at midday, and the lantern-lit evenings filled with sailors' tales. Families thrived on the influx of wealth. Artisans crafted intricate goods for export, and the very architecture, with its ornate warehouses and towering lighthouses, proclaimed unassailable dominance over the waves. But beneath this veneer of abundance, the world was shifting in ways few could perceive. Before the collapse took hold, the routines of port life forged an unbreakable illusion of permanence. Merchants rose with the tide charts, inspecting manifests under the early sun, while dock workers heaved crates stamped with exotic seals from Alexandria, Constantinople, and beyond. Children played among coiled ropes and drying nets, absorbing the scents of cinnamon and tar that defined their world. Women managed bustling households, sustained by the steady flow of imported luxuries, while guild halls hummed with debates over tariffs and safe passage. In Venice, the Arsenal shipyard echoed with the hammers of thousands, producing galleys that projected power across the seas. The air carried the constant murmur of languages from every corner of the known world, a symphony of commerce that masked deeper vulnerabilities. No one questioned the reliance on these watery highways. They were the foundation of identity, prosperity, and survival. Yet invisible cracks were forming, driven by forces far beyond the horizon, as new powers stirred and ancient balances trembled. Early warning signs appeared like faint ripples on calm waters, dismissed by those too immersed in daily gains to notice. In the 15th century, as Ottoman forces tightened their grip on eastern Mediterranean routes, caravans faced increasing dangers and tolls, subtly inflating costs for Venetian traders. Whispers reached the Doge's palace of Portuguese navigators probing southern coasts, seeking a sea path to the Indies that would bypass the traditional overland and Levantine conduits. Few in the counting houses paid heed. After all, Venice had weathered plagues, wars, and blockades before. In northern ports, shifts in river silting and competition from emerging rivals hinted at fragility, but optimism prevailed. The market still teemed with activity, spices sold at premium prices, and investors poured capital into grand ventures. The collapse did not begin with chaos, it began quietly, in the overlooked ledgers showing slight declines in volume, the gradual thinning of foreign vessels in the harbors. These subtle harbingers accumulated, like barnacles on a hull, slowing the momentum, without immediate alarm. As tensions mounted, instability rippled through the social and economic fabric of these port citadels. Rising competition from Atlantic powers eroded monopolies long held sacred. Venetian merchants watched helplessly as Portuguese carracks, heavy with Indian pepper, docked in Lisbon, flooding European markets, and slashing prices. Wars and blockades exacerbated the strain, diverting ships to safer, more profitable routes. In the Hanseatic ports, internal rivalries and the rise of Dutch and English traders fragmented the once cohesive league. Daily life grew strained. Dock workers idled longer between arrivals, while warehouses gathered dust. Fear simmered beneath polite conversations in taverns. Rumors of lost fleets, unpaid debts, and noble families quietly relocating assets. The canals of Venice, once vibrant thoroughfares, began to reflect a city holding its breath, awaiting confirmation of what many suspected, but none dared voice aloud. The invisible hand of geography and innovation was rewriting the map of power, yet the old guard clung to tradition. Key decisions and mounting pressures sealed the trajectory toward rupture. Venetian leaders, wary of innovation, doubled down on traditional galley fleets ill-suited to the vast Atlantic crossings, while Portuguese and Spanish fleets embraced nimbler designs and cannon-armed vessels. Diplomatic missteps, such as failed alliances against the Ottomans, further isolated the Republic. Heavy taxation to fund defenses burdened merchants already squeezed by shrinking margins. In other ports, short-sighted protectionism and resistance to new trading companies accelerated decline. Pressures mounted from within and without. Inflation from New World silver disrupted currencies, while plagues and conflicts drained manpower. The system, built on centuries of accumulated advantage, now faced existential tests. Leaders debated reforms in smoke-filled chambers, but inertia and vested interests prevailed. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late, as vital trade arteries rerouted southward and westward, leaving one central port stranded in the eddies of history. The moment the system began to fail arrived not with a cataclysmic storm, but through a cascade of quiet abandonments. By the early 16th century, the great spice fleets bypassed the Adriatic almost entirely, favoring direct voyages around the Cape of Good Hope. Venetian galleys returned half-empty, or not at all, their captains bearing news of superior competitors. Warehouses emptied, and the arsenal's forges fell silent for stretches that grew longer with each passing season. Similar fates befell northern ports, as shifting alliances and new maritime technologies favored deeper harbors and bolder entrepreneurs. The harbors, symbols of vitality, transformed into graveyards of idle ships, their hulls rotting in the stagnant waters. Merchants shuttered counting houses, artisans sought work elsewhere, and the grand processions that once celebrated arrivals dwindled to meager affairs. This was the tipping point, where economic logic overpowered historical prestige, rendering proud cities peripheral in the new global order. Human consequences unfolded in waves of despair and adaptation, etching deep scars on the social landscape. Families that had known generations of affluence suddenly faced hunger and uncertainty as jobs vanished from the docks. Crime crept into shadowed alleys, where prosperity once reigned, while emigration drained the cities of their young and ambitious. In Venice, the once lavish palazzos showed signs of neglect, faded frescoes and empty banquet halls, while the poor crowded into cramped quarters, their voices rising in quiet resentment. Social bonds frayed as guilds dissolved, and charity systems strained under the weight of widespread poverty. Stories emerged of once proud sailors turning to smuggling or begging, and merchants reduced to hawking trinkets to dwindling tourists. The psychological toll was profound. A collective mourning for a lost identity permeated the air, mingling with the ever-present smell of decay from unused quays. Communities that had thrived on interconnection now turned inward, haunted by the ghosts of bustling markets. The breakdown extended beyond economics into the very soul of these port societies, where order gave way to fragmentation. Public infrastructure crumbled as tax revenues plummeted, leaving canals silted and defenses weakened. Rival factions within the elite clashed over diminishing resources, while the common folk bore the brunt through famine and disease outbreaks, unchecked by weakened authorities. In the Hanseatic world, proud cities like Bruges saw their waterways bypassed by newer competitors, leading to depopulation and cultural stagnation. The vibrant cosmopolitanism faded, replaced by suspicion of outsiders and nostalgia for better days. Yet amid the ruins, small pockets of resilience flickered, innovators experimenting with new crafts or regional trade, but these were insufficient against the overwhelming tide. The collapse revealed the fragility of human constructs when the currents of commerce shifted irrevocably. Over the long term, these fallen port cities left an indelible mark on the course of civilization, reshaping trade networks, power balances, and cultural landscapes. Venice, though diminished, survived as a cultural beacon, its art and architecture influencing the Renaissance, even as its economic primacy evaporated. The rise of Atlantic ports like Lisbon, Amsterdam, and later Liverpool redirected global flows, fueling colonial expansions and industrial revolutions. Lessons echoed through history. Adaptability became the currency of survival, while rigid adherence to old models invited obsolescence. Abandoned docks transformed into museums or tourist sites, their silent cranes testaments to cycles of boom and bust. The redistribution of wealth and influence birthed new empires and accelerated technological leaps, proving that no port, however majestic, holds eternal dominion over the seas. These ruptures accelerated the interconnectedness of the modern world, where no single harbor commands unchallenged supremacy. Yet the haunting legacy persists in the quiet corners of these historic harbors, where the wind still carries echoes of lost voyages and unfulfilled ambitions. What remains are not merely ruins of stone and timber, but profound reminders of humanity's dependence on fragile systems of exchange. In the dim light of evening, one can almost hear the phantom calls of merchants long departed, urging caution to those who build today's global ports. Commerce may die in one place only to rebirth elsewhere, but the human cost lingers, a tapestry of ambition, hubris, and inevitable change. As new powers rise and technologies redefine maritime routes once more, the story of these port cities warns of the impermanence that shadows every golden age. The waters continue to flow, indifferent to the fates they once sustained, carrying forward the endless narrative of collapse and renewal that defines our shared history. The silence that descended upon these ports was not an ending but a transformation, one that forced societies to confront their vulnerabilities and adapt or fade. From the lagoons of Venice to the estuaries of the north, the death of commerce stripped away illusions of control, revealing the raw interplay of geography, politics, and innovation. Historians later traced the threads: the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the Portuguese breakthrough in 1498, the gradual eclipse of Mediterranean centrality. But for those living through it, the experience was visceral and disorienting. Families rebuilt lives inland or migrated to emerging hubs, carrying skills and memories that seeded new ventures. The architectural grandeur endured, repurposed for diplomacy, tourism, or quiet reflection, serving as monuments to resilience amid decay. In the end, the collapse of port cities when commerce died underscores a timeless truth about human endeavors. They are as transient as the tides they harness. The once thriving docks, now overgrown or repurposed, stand as sentinels against complacency, inviting us to ponder the forces that quietly erode even the mightiest foundations. As modern megaport complexes rise along new trade corridors, shadowed by container ships and automated cranes, one cannot help but sense the familiar undercurrents of change. The narrative tension endures, a dramatic interplay of human will against inexorable shifts in the world economy. These stories from the past illuminate the present, where the next rupture may already be stirring in the gentle lap of waves against forgotten piers. Through the lens of these historical fractures, we witness the profound interconnectedness of civilizations, where the prosperity of one port often signaled the quiet decline of another. The sensory memory of salt air mixed with spices lingers in the imagination, a poignant contrast to the emptiness that followed. Yet from such voids emerge new chapters: industrial ports, global supply chains, and digital-era logistics that continue the eternal dance of commerce. The reflective weight of these collapses invites contemplation not of despair, but of the enduring human capacity to navigate uncertainty, even as the seas claim and relinquish their favors across the ages. In the vast archive of civilization's ruptures, the death of port commerce remains one of the most visually arresting and instructively haunting.